What's up, guys? For the first time ever, we get to talk about our team since starting this podcast. In 2021, things were not looking good for the Montreal Canadiens when we started this podcast. They were dead last, which led them to draft Yuri Slafkovsky in the 2022 NHL entry draft. But they also got themselves Lane Hudson, two players that are currently on this playoff roster for the Montreal Canadiens. So, as of December 1st, the Canadiens sat 31st in the overall standings, and now they have punched their ticket to the Stanley Cup final. So they were second last. The last team to do this was St. Louis back in 2019, and they end up winning the Stanley Cup. I don't think the Canadiens will follow in their footsteps, but you never know. With these type of things, it all comes down to how hot your team could get in the playoffs. So the Montreal Canadiens versus the first place team in the East, the Washington Capitals. So we're going to get into this. We're going to be very passionate about it since it's our team, but we'll also try to not be too biased in terms of our expectations for this first round matchup.
Yeah. Well, I think we're gonna try to be as non-biased as possible, but also try to be realistic. I mean, you look at obviously the Habs, like you mentioned, they were pretty bad over the last couple of years. They've only started getting better as of now, which has been really nice. And even just in terms of watching the team, let's say make the playoffs and go through the progress that they've had over the last couple of years has really been fun to watch. But it's exciting. I think it's exciting for Montreal Canadiens fans and even just for us, we finally get to see playoff hockey at the Bell Center. We haven't done that since 2021 when the COVID pandemic happened and they went all the way to the Cup final. So it's going to be nice. It's going to be enjoyable to see exactly what we're capable of and how far the Canadiens can go if they get past round one. Or if they get eliminated as early as possible. I think the only thing that uh, I think becomes very interesting is you look at obviously the opponent, the Washington Capitals. What's interesting about them is first place in the league kind of came out of nowhere. They were one of those teams that no one really expected them to be the best team in the league. But they've added some really good pieces. Jacob Chikrin's been fantastic. Pierre-Luc Dubois had a really solid season. Logan Thompson has been lights out for the Caps this year. So I think there's a lot of optimism. Alexi Protas really set the stage for the Caps as much as possible and really became an impact player for them, 66 points. And obviously, let's talk about the grade eight, breaking Wayne Gretzky's goal record and how impressive that was. And to still, at the age that he's at, missing the amount of games that he did, he still missed, quite a few games this season and still found a way to score 44 goals during that time. Like Ovechkin isn't getting any younger either, and he's still finding ways to be able to be as productive as possible and reach a point of game status. So I think the Caps are definitely an opponent that the Habs shouldn't underestimate. I mean, I don't think anyone's underestimating the Capitals, but they are, I think, a decent matchup for Montreal compared to playing the likes of Toronto, Florida, and Tampa. The only reason I say that is they've kind of faltered since the Four Nations break. It hasn't really been the best that we've seen from Washington. They've dealt with a lot of injuries. They've had a lot of inconsistencies. And obviously, they haven't always played the greatest hockey. And even in net, like Thompson and Lindgren, both in the 885 save percentage, I believe, for both of them. So just not the best hockey for the Caps. And I think that's why if Montreal can, come into this series and, kind of see, play the game, play the way they've played for most of the Four Nations break, maybe not the last 10 games, but before that, and find a way to get results. I think they've got a chance here. So it's going to be interesting to see. But yeah, just credit to the Caps, credit to the way they've played, and they're gonna be a good team. Like I think it's gonna be a good series. I think it's gonna be a series that is going to. I don't know if it goes to 7 games, but I think it's going to be a series where, I think goaltending is going to play a factor in this because, again, Sam Montembeault for the Canadiens, kind of an uncertainty, right? It's his first playoff series. He's going to be the starter. How is he going to be able to adapt to the pressure of being able to play in the playoffs, right? We saw what Sam Montembeault is capable of doing when he's on rest versus when he's playing, consistently. So is he going to be able to maintain that for a playoff series? We'll have to wait and see, right? And then for the Capitals, it's a question of, is Logan Thompson going to be ready to go for game one? And if he's not ready to go for game one, is Lindgren going to be able to come in? And if Montreal's playing Charlie Lindgren for even for the start of the series, I think Montreal has a really good chance of stealing a couple of wins there and going back to Montreal, maybe even up if not up 2-0, maybe tied 1-1. So there's a lot of question marks in the series, and I think it's going to be interesting to see what happens. But if Washington's fully healthy, it's going to be a tough series for Montreal, and I guess we'll have to wait and see what they do. But right now, just based on the caps and everything, I think it's going to be a close series. I have Montreal in 6, and the reason I say that is Lane Hudson, Nick Suzuki, you know, uh, career years for both guys. Lane Hudson, favorite to win the Calder, just been fantastic this season. Offensively and defensively, he's improved. He's been Montreal's best defenseman all year. He's going to be exciting to watch in the playoffs. Caden Gooley, back to being 100% and ready to go. I think Montreal is going to need that as well, right? But even just in general, Cole Caulfield scored 37 goals. He had 70 points this year, right? Brendan Gallagher had a little bit of a resurgence this year compared to last year. Obviously, Patty Laine, a big impact on the power play for him. Christian Dvorak had a really good season. So Montreal's got a lot of depth in their lineup, right? And what I like about this team is, they've got a mix of young guys. They got a mix of veterans. And they've had guys that have been able to obviously produce in big moments. Like I said, Nick Suzuki really riding the train and being their best player all season. And obviously Lane Hudson helping that out. Uri Slafkovsky, I think we're expecting big things out of Slafkovsky in the playoffs. And obviously the last one, and I think the biggest question mark is Ivan Demidov, right? They brought him in. He's got 2 games under his belt for the Canadiens, 2 points during that time. How big of a factor is Ivan Demidov going to be for the Montreal Canadiens in these playoffs? Is he going to be the difference maker that the Canadiens need him to be? And if he is, this could change the complexity of the series, right? Because Ivan Demidov has the talent to become one of the best players in the league in the future, and he's got the talent to become Montreal's franchise cornerstone. So it's curious to see exactly what the Canadiens are going to do. I think it's going to be exciting to see, and I think there's a lot of wild cards in this series that can make Montreal series interesting. I'm just going to go out on a limb right now, and I'm not saying this is biased. We're going to jump into, I'm going to let Chris give his opinion too, but I think Montreal wins the series in 6. And I think the reason why is they're on a high. They're playing they're playing pretty good hockey, and I think they're going to be motivated, man. The series, especially the 2 games at the Bell Center, the 2 guaranteed games at the Bell Center, right? Depending how far the series goes, like the crowd, the city is going to go crazy. And I just think that like Montreal is going to find a way. Like, I don't think they lose at home. I'd be very shocked if they lost at home. I mean, it could happen, obviously, but like, I just think with how big it's and how important that series is, like Montreal players are going to be so motivated to play game 3 and game 4 at home. And it's going to be really, really exciting to watch. So Chris, what are your thoughts on this series? Where do you think this series goes? And how excited are you as a Habs fan to see them back? Um,
Well, I'm very excited. And, a lot of people were saying that the Habs were going to blow it. Okay. But when you
They
look at
almost
their
did. They almost did.
yes, but I want to say one thing though. The true team that blew it were the Columbus Blue Jackets. Because the Columbus Blue Jackets were pretty much in a playoff spot all year long. Okay. And if you look back at December, Columbus was higher in the standings than Montreal. So
Right.
they're the ones who blew it, not Montreal. And even if Montreal was not going to make it, you know
Yeah.
what? I would have been proud of this team because they weren't even expected to make the playoffs. And you can make the same case for the Calgary Flames, who tied in points with the Minnesota Wild for 96 and unfortunately didn't make it. But this team is
It was
very
actually the Blues.
special.
They tied with the Blues, but yeah.
Sorry, with the Blues. Sorry, my fault. Um, yeah, so this is a very special team, and this is a team that is on the rise. And this is not even the full version of what to expect in terms of a true Stanley Cup contending team. This is just step one. And having Demidov come in when he was not even supposed to be here until end of May, where the Canadiens are probably going to be out of a playoff spot, the fact that he was able to join for the last 2 games of the season, that's something special. And I feel like something good's going to come out of it. We already saw what he was capable of doing in game 1. Game 2, they gave him more of a sheltered role, and I understand because they really wanted to close out that game and win. And had they not win that game, they would have been eliminated because Columbus completely destroyed the Islanders in their last game of the season. So thankfully, I think that was the right choice in that particular game. But what I like about this team is that everyone was a hero at one point in the season. At one point, you had Gallagher, you had Gallagher, Anderson, and Dvorak's line carrying towards the end of the
Yeah.
finish line. At one point, it was Stavkovsky, Caulfield, and Suzuki. At one point, it was the power play with Laine, coming in and being a power play merchant. At one point, you had Carrier coming in and being very productive at the start of his Montreal Canadiens tenure after being traded from the Nashville Predators, which I think that was a huge cornerstone for
Yeah.
the Montreal Canadiens in terms of taking the next step, upgrading from Justin Barron, getting Dabesh in over Primo, and him winning games versus teams like the Florida Panthers and the Colorado Avalanche. Without these key moments from these players, including Jake Evans and Armia doing so well on the penalty kill and scoring so many shorthanded goals. Without these key moments, the Canadiens would not be in a playoff spot. They've
Right.
literally got contribution from everybody. There's not one reason why the Canadiens have made the playoffs. There's many reasons why the Canadiens have made the playoffs. And Montembeault having the most career wins in a season, the most career starts, the I think the most amount of shutouts in a season as a starting goaltender. Another thing, Lane Hudson being put over Mike Matheson on the power play, which was huge for the
Yeah.
Canadians. All these moments have contributed to why the Canadians deserve to be in the playoffs. Everybody
Right.
should be proud of themselves. And I think this is the best effort I've seen from a Montreal Canadiens team in over 10 years. They didn't rely on one line, they didn't rely on the power play. They
Well, they
got
kind of did.
contribution from everybody. Yeah, at certain points, though. But I'm saying they relied on people at certain points, but everyone contributed at a certain
Yeah.
point throughout the season.
Yeah.
And in terms of the Washington Capitals, I feel like they never really faced adversity all year. They were hot for a good chunk of the season until after the Four Nations, and they had a lot going for themselves. They wanted to beat Wayne Gretzky's record for Ovechkin, which he did. Now he's at 897 goals. Gretzky's at 894, so that's great for him. Logan Thompson had a chip on his shoulder that he didn't make Team Canada, and he wanted to prove a point. But I feel like everything after that has been quite disappointing for the Caps.
Yeah.
Logan Thompson's numbers after Four Nations haven't been great. I understand the celebrations for Ovechkin, but I think it got to a point where it was like every single day, and it's like the team should be focusing on playoffs,
Right.
not always celebrating him every single day. Two celebrations, three celebrations, okay, it's fine, but every single day for a full week, like I know a couple of Capital fans that are telling me that was excessive. They
Yeah.
had to focus on playoffs and key injuries to Alexei Protas, who's in a walking boot. He's week to week. I don't really see him playing a game in the first round of the playoffs. Logan Thompson's not 100%. I know Chikrin's been dealing with injuries throughout the season. Ovi, I think he's at 100% right now, but once he came back from his broken leg, he was still like at 80%. He wasn't fully healthy. I want to see how this team does in the playoffs because we know that
And they don't
Pierre-Luc
have
Dubois.
Faravari too, sir.
Yeah, very off. Yeah, he's very underrated too on their decor. And we know that Pierre-Luc Dubois is not really a playoff performer either. But things have changed for him since joining the Washington Capitals. They have multiple 50 plus point getters on this team this year, whereas the Habs don't have that. The Habs have only four, and
Right.
then everyone else is in the 30s. So, at this point in time, it's really tough to say who to win this series, but I think it goes back to 2010. I think with all the signs I've been seeing that the Habs finished in the last playoff spot on the last game of the season. They're facing the first seeded team in the East, in the Washington Capitals. They have number 13 and 14 at forward, who are their best two players. Back then it was Plekanec Camilleri. Now it's Caulfield and Suzuki. All these signs tell me that the Canadians could beat this team. And the Washington Capitals don't have the best goaltending in the league. So I think out of all the matchups the Habs wanted, where we could have potentially faced maybe a Tampa or the Toronto Maple Leafs, I think this is the best first matchup for the Canadians to gain confidence and potentially go on a roll. But with that being said, I think ultimately, I think I have to go with the Washington Capitals in seven. I think the Habs are going to put up a good show, a good fight, but the inexperience factor will cost them at the end because the Caps do have a lot of experience on this
Yeah.
team. They've added a lot of good pieces. Nick Dowd is so good as a fourth line centerman. They added
Very good.
Manjapane, who has experience with the Calgary Flames in multiple playoff runs. They added Chikrin, who's a fantastic dynamic defenseman, and he's really offensive. And that takes off the load of John Carlson.
Right.
The only guy they really added at the deadline was Anthony Bavoli, but they added Lars Eller at the
Yeah.
beginning of the season, and he knows what it takes to be a true competitor in the playoffs. He won a Stanley Cup with the Washington Capitals before, and
Mhm.
they have good depth. They added Ryan Leonard as well. I know he hasn't been that great, but you know, let's see what he does in the playoffs. But I do agree with you that Ivan Demidov could be the X factor in this series. But I think in terms of goaltending, I think it's pretty even. I'm not going to discredit what the Capitals goalies have done this year. In terms of defense, I think it's pretty even. And then I would say offense is where the Capitals take it.
Yeah, I mean, I would say that. I think in that I think Capitals do have the better goalie. I think if you're taking Logan Thompson over Sam Montembeau, I think teams are going to take Logan Thompson.
I'm looking
Uh,
at I'm looking at it as a tandem because we don't know
yeah,
who's going to start.
that's true. But I'm saying like if the Caps have if Thompson comes in for game one and he's ready to go, I think the Caps have better goal because I think with Lingren and Nets, and in my opinion, I think if Charlie Lingren starts game one, then it's a little bit different. I think we have a different conversation because I think Sam Montembeau was a better goalie than Charlie Lingman. But
Yeah, I
I
agree.
understand. Obviously, I don't necessarily disagree with you. I think the Caps do have more experience. I think ultimately at the end of the day, they are a better team. Like just on paper, they are, right? And I think the biggest issue that I have with the Washington Capitals is Alexei Protas is a big X factor for them. And I know we talk about Alex Ovechkin. PLD had a really good year. Dylan Strome's been fantastic, right? And Tom Wilson, like we all know what Tom Wilson's capable of doing, right? The guy is a menace, especially in the playoffs. This guy's going to be a tough player to play against. My thing though is Alexei Protas has been such an important aspect to the Washington Capitals' success this season, right? He's been really good at both ends of the ice. He's been Washington's most consistent player. He doesn't get a whole lot of power play time, so all of his ice time, most of his points came from 5-on-5,
Yeah,
which was
that's
impressive
true.
as hell, right? And him being out and potentially missing, if not the whole series, at least the start of it, I think could make a huge factor for them because you saw the difference. Even if the Caps, right, the last couple of games of the season, or the last, I would say like 10, 15 games of the season, they haven't necessarily been at their best. I think a big reason as to why they haven't been at their best is because of Alexei Protas. He changes the way they play. He changes the way the players around him play because he makes such a difference in just the way he plays the game, how good he is in the defensive zone, how good he is in the offensive zone, how he's good at winning puck battles, right? So there's a lot of key differences there. And then you also take into consideration the fact that Faravari hasn't really played and is hurt as well. And Faravari is a good shutdown defenseman. He's a guy who can play, give you 20 minutes a night and play top minutes for you. So, you take that into consideration that Faravari's, day to day and could miss a little bit. You take the fact that Alexei Protas is out and could miss some time and potentially some games during the playoffs. And you're also taking into consideration that Logan Thompson might not be at 100%, even though he does play game one. Those three factors alone make this series a lot closer than I think people would give it credit. And the other thing, too, is look, Alex Ovechkin, we all know what he's capable of doing. Dylan Strome, like I said before, fantastic season for him. But there is flaws to Washington's game, right? And they're a team that makes a lot of unforced turnovers. And I think if Montreal can put a lot of pressure on their defense, it could make Montreal's situation a little bit easier. My concern with the Canadiens is not on their offense, actually. It's on their defense. And the reason I'm going to say that is I think Montreal can score goals. I think we've seen that Montreal, when they're forechecking the way they're capable of forechecking, they're a team that can score a lot of goals. I think my concern is that they don't really have a second line as of right now. I don't think Newhook, Line and Demidov, although they're listed as a second line, haven't necessarily played as a second line. Although, listen, Demidov's only been there for 2 games, but I'm
Yeah,
talking about more Newhook and Line that haven't really played like a second line. So what Montreal really has is one first line and let's call it three third lines. Okay. And it's good in the depth aspect of it, but I think in terms of offense, I think the Capitals obviously have a lot more, let's
yeah,
say, balance on their lines. I think defensively is where Montreal might lose this series. And the reason I say that is Jacob Chikrin and John Carlson are, really good defensemen. Chikrin, really good offensive defenseman. He's had a resurgence season this year, scored 20 goals for the Capitals, which was impressive. John Carlson, always been a steady defenseman who can get points and be an dynamite, but also be good in his own end. So those two guys are going to be big difference makers for them. And then they obviously have Matt Roy, who is a really good, shutdown defenseman, can play big minutes for you. Obviously, Faravari, who's not there. But then they also have a lot of depth guys as well. Trevor Van Riemsdyk as another one who could be really good. So Montreal, I think the biggest problem is going to be their defense. And the reason I say that is, look, Lane Hudson, offensive dynamite, offensive defenseman, had a great season. I think he improved as the season went on. My concern is Mike Matheson, Jaden Struble, and David Savard. And Struble's been good. This is not me arguing a David Struble, a Jaden Struble.
Struble is really good, actually.
But the thing is that David Savard, although he's a big important player for Montreal in the penalty kill,
blocks a lot of shots.
He blocks a lot of shots. In my opinion, I think he's too slow. And obviously, as you see, look, he's going to retire at the end of the season, as he announced. He's a little bit slow. And I think Montreal and Marty St. Louis might have to make some decisions in that. Listen, I know David Savard is a big shot blocker and can play penalty kill for you, but I think an Arbor Jacki, although he's not the best defenseman and he has flaws to his game, I think Arbor Jacki is meant to play in the playoffs. And I think Arbor Jacki is the type of guy that can be a big difference maker for the Canadiens in the playoffs because of his physicality and him getting into the face. And especially, I guess a guy like Tom Wilson, I think you want Arbor Jacki out there. My biggest concern is going to be Mike Matheson and Alex Carrier. I think Alex Carrier has had a really good season for the Canadiens, but my concern is that the last 10, 15 games, him and Mike Matheson have been Montreal's worst defensive pairing.
Yeah.
And that's a big problem for the Canadiens because Mike Matheson plays 30 minutes a night, right? About 28, 30 minutes a night. Carrier plays about 22, 23. And they're good players. They're not this is not me. I'm not trying to bat on Mike Matheson's drum and say that he's the worst defenseman on the team. But he makes a lot of defensive mistakes in his defensive zone that lead to goals. And that is a problem for the Canadiens because as much as you want Lane Hudson and Caden Gooley to play a lot more minutes, the thing is that you do need to have a balanced top four. So what Montreal is going to have to do if they want to, let's say, limit the amount of opportunities that come in and try to win the series, they're going to have to figure out a situation to maybe not overplay Mike Matheson and Alex Carrier or find ways to balance their minutes a little bit because Mike Matheson, he's clearly shown that, he can't play 27, 30 minutes a night and he can't play in defensive zone situations, right? He's really bad in his own end. He's made
Yet they put him on the penalty kill but he does a good job on the penalty kill.
It's just, it's not like, this is not me trying to like talk about all the bad things that Mike Matheson does. He's a guy who can play in your top four. He's a guy who can play 22, 23 minutes a night. My concerns is that he shouldn't be getting a lot more defensive zone assignments than he does. And I think he makes a lot of really costly mistakes in his defensive end that he cannot be making in the playoffs because if he does, the teams are going to lose. But also, as much as we praised Alex Carrier, let's talk about it too. Alex Carrier hasn't been at his best either, right? And this is about Montreal getting the best out of those two guys. If Mike Matheson and Alex Carrier can return to being, let's say, two really good pieces for the Canadiens, then I think you'll have a top four that can easily compete. Because Caden Gooley, when he's 100% healthy and playing at his best, is Montreal's probably second best defenseman. Lane Hudson's Montreal's best defenseman at the moment. And then you have Mike Matheson. You need that top four pairing of Mike Matheson and Alex Carrier to be solid. And you also need that when David Savard and Jaden Struble are in the lineup, that, if they're playing 12, 15 minutes a night, just to be steady and play smart and physical hockey. I think David Savard, right, is a little bit of an undertaker. He's had underappreciated defenseman because he's had a rough season, I think, just in terms of statistics. But he's a guy who can block shots. I think if you limit his minutes to about 11, 12 minutes a night, you're getting a good player out of him. But I also wouldn't be opposed to being like, you know what? If game one doesn't work out with David Savard, maybe game two you throw Jacki in.
See, I have confidence in this decor, but it's just the pairings itself that concern me because they were at their best when it was Gooley or Carrier on the second pairing, Hudson and Matheson on the first, and then they had Struble / Jacki with Savard on the third. That was when they were at their best. This is back in December, January.
Right.
Okay. So I don't know why they got rid of that because I look at Carrier and Matheson the last 10 games of the season and just not working out. And Gooley is such a key component to their decor. He's so underrated in terms of his two-way game. He can contribute offensively and defensively, which at this point in time makes him better than Mike Matheson, right? Gooley could hold his own line. So you put him on Carrier who's very defensive as well, but he's shown that he can be offensive at times, especially when he started with the Habs after getting traded to them from the Predators. And Matheson has not been having a great offensive season. And if you take away the offense from Matheson, what is he truly good at? He's not the best defensive guy. I know they put him on the penalty kill and he does a good job on the PK with Savard, but we have to give more credit to guys like Evans, Dvorak, and Armia on the PK. The Habs have one of the best PKs in the league, which is something we should also mention as well. And their power play was in the top 10 at one point, but it fiddled away because their power play became too predictable, which is why I think at one point they're going to have to consider putting Demidov on that power play.
Right.
And but I do like based off what I've seen this whole season, I do believe in Montreal's decor. It's just the pairings itself that need to be adjusted, and I do believe Jack Guy is going to have to be put into this lineup eventually because Savard is, you know, wear and tear at this point, and he knows it. He said it. My body's not the same. That's why I'm retiring. The guys have known for weeks, so maybe that's a spark too. You know, that the Habs play for Savard the same way that they did for
Yeah.
Weber and Price. You know,
Right.
so and they love Savard. They call him their dad
Yeah.
basically.
Yeah.
So because he's the oldest guy on the team, and another key component to Montreal's success is Emil Heineman. Such a
Yeah.
great forechecker, and I know he was more offensive in the beginning of the season, but I think coming back from his injury after that incident in Utah after getting hit by a car really affected his game,
Right.
and he hasn't been the same in terms of his offensive production. But after coming back from his second injury, we saw that he was getting some chances the last two games. I think that the third and fourth line are going to be very, very key to Montreal's success. Apart from fixing those
Right.
deep pairings, I think Montreal's weakness at this point is their second line.
Yeah.
If Line A cannot skate and do anything 5v5 as he's shown in the season, what's he gonna do when
They,
it comes
they,
to a physical matchup in the playoffs? He
they
will
need
get trucked.
they need line A to be like, look, Montreal fans, Montreal in general knew what they signed up for when they got Patrick Laine. Like let's like forget about whatever everybody's been talking about on Twitter and on X. When Montreal traded for Patrick Laine, we knew that we were getting this guy to score goals. And what's he done? He has scored goals. He scored 20 goals this year. Like let's in 50 games, he scored 20 goals. That's about a 35 goal pace or 30 goal pace, which is not bad. Listen, and he was injured as well, right? So he didn't really have a training. Well, he had like one preseason game, right? Came back in December, like whatever. Patrick Laine is not a defensive demon. He's not a guy who's going to be good in his defensive zone, but he needs to play a lot better than he has in his last 10 games. And I think that's the biggest thing that Montreal needs to also take into consideration is Patrick Laine needs to find a way to be better 5-on-5 in these playoffs because he's become too predictable on the power play that teams know. And Montreal's power play, like you said, became very stale and predictable because they know they're going to pass it to Laine. And Laine's got a great shot, and he's got to get open and in situations where he can use that shot. But Laine is also going to have to differentiate his game into like, look, he might not get the same amount of power play opportunities that he would get in a normal season, right? So a lot of his goals are going to have to come 5-on-5, and playing with a winger like Ivan Demidov and a centerman like Alex Newhook might allow him to do that. But Laine is going to have to show a little bit more effort and be a little bit more present because if he's not able to do that, I think the Canadiens, it's going to be a rougher series. But again, like I said, I don't want to blame him solely. I understand the Canadiens, we traded for him. We know what to expect. This is not me going at Patrick Laine, but again, they're going to need more out of him if they want to go far in the
And
playoffs or if they want to be
yeah,
successful.
I'm not saying Demidov needs better line mates because Line is an
No,
elite sniper, right? It's
right.
just that they need to mesh and adjust because Newhook, ever since taking the second line role, has been fantastic, in my opinion.
Yeah,
He's
he
been
just can't
very
finish.
good. The only thing is that he can finish. He has
He
the
can't finish.
speed, he has the creativity, he knows where to place the puck. He's very good at that. But I haven't seen him been effective in terms of capitalizing on the chances that oh my god, Ivan Demidov has been feeding him the last couple of games. Apart from one goal, Newhook could have easily scored 5 goals in his last two
He
games.
could have honestly this year he probably could have had 25, 30 goals. With the
Yeah,
amount of chances that he's created and the amount of scoring opportunities that he's had, if he buries even like let's say 10 15% of those chances, he's got 20 goals this year, easily.
Yeah,
So
I think
it's that too. Yeah,
yeah, and it's unfortunate this team that does not have Kirby Doc, and I don't think Kirby Doc will ever play a playoff game for the Montreal Canadiens. I think he will be gone this offseason. That's another topic for another time. But you know, the Habs, another key factor is that they've been resilient, but not only resilient in terms of their play, but also in terms of their health. There's been players that were expected not to come back, Caden Gooley being one of them, Patrick Laine being the second, and they came back. So that's great for the Habs, to see that they've been pretty healthy this whole season compared to the past couple of years that they got very unlucky with injuries. So that also plays a factor in terms of their success. But in terms of their decor, like if they really do get desperate, because at this point, are the Habs playing to win or are the Habs playing to participate?
they're playing to win.
And
I think well, they got to play to win.
yeah, I hope so because if the decor is not working out, I know Laval is like the best team in the AHL. They've dominated all season long.
Yeah,
But you call up a guy like David Rambacker?
I don't think you wanna. I don't think you wanna take that
They,
success.
they've won multiple games without him because Rambacker was
Yeah,
injured.
but you're he hasn't played enough games this year to where you can turn around and warrant a call up. Like in my opinion, the reason I'm saying that is like, look, I've watched David Rombacher in the AHL this year. Um, he's been good in the games he's played, but he hasn't played enough. I don't think he's at a point now where he's played enough games this season to where you can turn around and say, you know what, they should call him up. I think that he needs to have a playoff run with Laval. I think he needs to play meaningful games in Laval and understand, get his feet wet, play consistently, and then next year we can have the conversation about whether he can make the team or
Okay,
not. I think
well,
this year it's too premature.
if the Habs do get an injury on D,
Adam
Jack Ice
Engstrom,
slots in, right? And I think,
Adam
yeah, Enstrom is a good option. And
Or Logan Mayu, but I don't think it's going to be Mayu. It's probably going to be Adam
yeah,
Engstrom would be
Engstrom's more
my
complete. Yeah.
choice.
And if that happens, that kind of reminds me again of the 2010 playoff run because someone got injured. I forgot who it was for the Habs. And guess who they called up?
PK Subban.
BK Subban.
Yeah.
So, anyways, I just want to take a look at one quick thing in terms of the team stats overall in the season. I know it doesn't always
No, yeah.
um, play into the playoffs, but in terms of goals per game, the Capitals are second. So they're a team that scores a lot of goals, not just on the power play, but 5v5. But like you said, without Protas being there, that's going to definitely hurt them. So
Right.
we'll see what happens
I
there.
Yeah, I just want to add one last thing, and before we like jump into that, Montreal. The other thing that they're gonna have to do is you talked about them being resilient. I agree, they've been resilient all season. The only thing that I'm gonna say though, they have to start games on time during the playoffs. They cannot falter and have games like they had against Detroit or against Nashville or against even Ottawa or Toronto late in the season where they didn't start the game on time. In the playoffs, right, you don't have enough times to be able to correct your mistakes. And Montreal needs to come out. They need to start on time every game, and they need to hold the lead. If they get a lead, a 1 goal lead, a 2 goal lead, whatever it is, right? They got to be able to manage that game and be able to manage the game. As much as we like the fact that they were able to come back from being down, it's great. Don't get me wrong, and it's awesome that they're able to do that. But they need to also be able to understand and be able to play with the lead. And if they can do that, I think they can win. They can easily be in a better position because Montreal, yeah, I think a lot of it was, yeah, they were resilient. I also think a lot of it was luck, but a lot of it was resiliency as well. And so I think because of that, you got to be able to see what you can do when you've got the lead as well. Because if you can't win without the lead, then how good really are you?
Yeah, I will
So,
say one thing though. I'm gonna close up with the stats, but then I'm gonna say one final statement. What might be
right,
controversial, or it might, bring a lot of people's attention to the subject. But let me just go over this first. So in terms of goaltending, the Capitals are 15th, the Habs are 20th. So that's
right,
pretty close in terms of the goaltending. Like I was saying before, I think it's pretty even with that, based off the whole season as a whole. We're not just looking at what Logan Thompson did at the beginning of the season because you can't also discredit what Montembeault has done for the Habs. It's not easy being a first goalie for the Habs taking over Carey Price. There's a lot of high expectations, and I
no,
think
and yeah, you're right. And when he plays, when he's when he's not overused, I think he's a pretty good goalie.
Okay. In terms of their power play, Washington's 15, the Habs are 21, so a little bit of a gap there.
Yeah,
Um, but the Caps were higher at one point, and so were the Habs. They've fallen from where
yeah.
they were
And also
originally.
the PK percentage.
Is there a PK percentage?
Is there a PK percentage? I think it's if you go up for the NHL, there should be a. Oh, I guess not. I don't know.
Oh, okay, guess not. But we know that the Habs are one of the better penalty killing teams. If I'm mistaken, they're better than Washington in that category.
Right.
And I think Carolina's first, if I'm not mistaken. So,
That's
but I will say this though. I know this might be controversial, but whoever wins this series between the Caps and the Habs will have the easiest path to the Eastern Conference Final because they
well,
face the
yeah, it's
winner.
easier. It's easier because you're not playing Tampa or Florida or Toronto or
Yeah,
Ottawa.
they would
But
face the winner of Carolina and New
New
Jersey.
Jersey,
And
yeah,
note like I said in that video with Zach, we made that video. Carolina is very good defensively, but they've been very inconsistent offensively. Their power play is not that great, and their goaltending is very inconsistent. And in terms of New Jersey, without having Jack Hughes, you know that's a major hole. And I know they got Dougie Hamilton, but the goaltending hasn't been great either. And yeah, maybe they could stabilize that and get back on track. But since Markstrom has been back from his injury, he hasn't been the same. And I know they relied heavily on Allen this year, and he's done a great job. But at the end of the day, you're gonna have to stick to one goal. You can't be going back and forth. And I don't think Allen could be a playoff goalie.
yeah. I
He's a,
think it's
yeah.
well. I agree. I look. I have this in my bracket, and I've made more than one. I've made actually two. One that I did with coworkers and one that I just did. I have Montreal winning in one and going all the way to the conference final. I also have Washington winning one and going all the way to the conference final. And the reason I'm going to tell you this is I agree with you on this. I think whoever wins this series between Montreal and Washington will go to the Eastern Conference final. Not because I don't believe in Carolina or New Jersey, but it's like you said. I just think that this is a bit like Carolina and New Jersey, they're two good teams. Like, look, don't get me wrong, but Carolina plays such a boring style of hockey, and I think they've got a lot of flaws in their game that can easily be exploited. The thing is that Montreal hasn't really done well against Carolina, so we'll take that into consideration. New Jersey, though, is a team that I don't necessarily think has a lot of like promise. I think they've dealt with a lot of injuries this year, and obviously the Jack Hughes thing is a little bit scary. But they're very good offensively and not the best defensively. So I think that no
But
matter
they're
who
not
wins,
good 5v5. They're heavily reliant on the power play.
yeah, but that's what I'm saying, right? So I think whoever wins between Montreal and Washington has a good chance of going to the Eastern Conference Final because I just think that they'll be very motivated from that first series that it'll carry on to the second series. I just don't think Carolina and New Jersey is going to have the same effect of the playoff series as every other ones. And I also just I feel, but you can also say the same for Carolina. Like this is Carolina's easiest chance to an Eastern Conference Final as well, technically, if you look at the matchups. But are they going to be able to get over that hump? So there's a lot of question marks, but
Yeah.
I think ultimately at the end of the day, Washington Montreal is going to be a very good series. I think Washington or Montreal can easily win this series. I have Montreal in 6 just because, yes, it's more of a biased prediction. I know.
My heart says Montreal, but my mind says
Yeah,
Washington. So let's see what happens.
I think I'll say that too. My heart says Montreal. My mind I think it's going to be Washington in 7 in that case if I'm going based on my mind, but I'm going to
Yeah.
stick with my heart prediction and say Montreal in 6.
Also, I'd like to say two last things. Ovi wasn't that great in the playoffs last year. He was a ghost. I understand the whole season was a disaster for him and the Caps last year,
Right.
and they barely squeaked by into the playoffs. But that's something to look at too. Age is up there, so we'll see. But the same thing could be said about Savard. So we'll
Yeah.
see about that. But also, important news that just came out: Alexi Protas took the ice this morning in a non-contact jersey. He is still a long way to go.
Okay. So
So
he'll probably be back at some point during the series. I don't think he plays tomorrow though.
no, if anything, he'll
Or
be.
when you're seeing this, I don't think he plays today because you're probably gonna see this on a Monday.
Yeah, maybe he's probably like game
He'll probably
five,
be back in game
7.
3, game 3, game 4. I wouldn't be surprised if he's back for game. I don't think
You
he's
think they
back.
rush him?
I don't think he's back. Well, I think it also depends on the series, right? If the Canadiens go up 2-0, I think kind of got no choice.
Yeah, I agree.
But if
If
it's
the
one
Habs
one,
if the Habs could win one out of their first two games versus Washington, this
that's a
is a
good sign.
7-game series. Yeah.
I think so. I think so. Anyways, we'll
Okay.
see.
Yeah, we'll see. Well, anyways, guys, thank you so much for watching this episode. Thank you for watching our whole complete series. It's been a pleasure to cover the whole first round with you guys, like we've been since 2021. We'll be back for the second round, and we'd like to hear thoughts in the description below for every single video. Your thoughts, who the winners are going to be, and in how many games. And if you want to, drop your Stanley Cup favorite for this year, you could also do that. So. Make sure to like, subscribe to this video, to this channel if you haven't already, and like this video. And we'll see you in the next episode of the Young Guns podcast. Thank you so much, guys, for watching.